Hello and welcome to How to Win the Lottery, Ohio module, fourth book, the titular Ohio by past guest of the show, Stephen Markley. I'm Joey Lewandowski.
I'm Shreds.
Do you think there is an arrogance, a confidence, a cockiness in naming your book after one of our modules?
I like it. I like it that it's like it's weird because reading this book I felt like, yeah, this could be New Jersey. But you know, it felt like someone was writing about like where they're from.
Yes.
In a way that like really like felt lived in. Even if that lived in place didn't feel particularly unique. But it was just like, oh, I know this place.
Well, it's representative of a lot of different things and a lot of different and a specific. So I think what is, and look, don't get me wrong, we have Ohio facts we're going to get to very soon. I am very glad that we read, even though it was brutally difficult and depressed the hell out of me, The Deluge, because I feel like reading that and talking to Markley helped me understand who he was and what he cared about, and then going sort of back in time sort of to read this.
I think that's a good point, yeah.
I was like, oh, I understand exactly kind of why he wrote The Deluge reading this.
Is it because he uses the phrase "the deluge" like 15 times in this book? Yeah. It's like, oh man, this guy really loves that.
No, I think he wrote The Deluge because he is a guy your age who came of age when 9/11 and then the Iraq War and then the housing crisis and saw the world falling down around himself.
Yeah.
And took the small focus of the small town, whatever, and how that represents the country, and then be like, well, what if I did the country? Yeah. What if I did the whole, like the big thing?
Yeah. And it's interesting because reading this book was very much like I felt in it because of all those things. Because it's like, oh yeah, I'm like the exact same age as these people. Yeah. And it felt, I mean, the characters in the book are, I think, 2 years younger than me.
Well, we've talked about this a lot in that even though you're only a couple years older than me, that is such a difference, especially with 9/11, because like I was in 8th grade and they didn't tell us.
Yes.
And so it wasn't like all of my friends were 4 years too young to go off to war. Like it's all of that was just like, it was enough of a distance that like I was still basically a child and you were an adult.
Yeah.
So,
but I make up that gap by being immature.
That's what people love about you. So I got Ohio facts, odds and ends. It's a 7-question quiz. Some of multiple choice, some are just open-ended. I think you can get some of these. I don't know if you can get all of them, but we'll see.
I probably won't get any of them. Let's see. I don't know Ohio.
Question number 1, I think the possible.
Yeah.
How many major professional sports teams are in Ohio across the 5 big leagues? So we got MLB, NBA, NFL, NHL, and MLS.
MLS.
I was doing research, and this was the answer that came up. I'm like, I kind of like this, because the other one, it's easy. Well, if you do 4 and then 5. So if you do the 4 leagues, how many teams are there?
In baseball, you have the Reds and the Guardians.
Mm-hmm. I'm not confirming. I'm just...
In basketball, you have the Cavaliers.
Mm-hmm.
In football, you have the Browns.
Mm-hmm.
Hockey, you have the Blue Jackets.
Mm-hmm. Plus 5.
In Major League Soccer, is there also a Columbus team?
Okay.
I don't know.
So you're guessing 5 or 6, depending on if you...
Let's see. I feel like I may have left out. Is there like another baseball team that I'm forgetting or another? Yeah, that's it. I feel comfortable with that.
So there are 2 soccer teams. There's the Columbus Crew.
Okay, so I was right about Columbus.
And FC Cincinnati.
Yeah, I don't know.
But you also forgot Houday, the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, sure.
So you were close, but incomplete.
Yeah. I should have gone, instead of going by sport, I should have gone by city.
How many cities in Ohio have a population of more than 1 million people?
2.
0.
Okay.
Columbus has 900,000. Cleveland, Cincinnati, both about 300,000.
Wow, I wouldn't have thought that Columbus would be the big one.
Neither did I. I was surprised by that. How many time zones are in Ohio?
2.
All Eastern time zone, baby.
Eastern.
Just 1.
Yeah, I'm bad at this.
This is, you can't get this, but what nickname, well, maybe you can just based on a guess. What nickname is Ohio known by due to its historical connection to space exploration?
The Buckeye State.
The birthplace of astronauts. Because John Glenn, Neil Armstrong, Jim Lovell, and Judith Resnick were all born there.
Yeah, sure. Also, Jeffrey Dahmer. Right?
Astronaut. What is the state beverage of Ohio? This is just like, you're not going to get this. I just think it's a fun answer.
Jolt Cola.
Tomato juice.
Oh my God. What the fuck?
Ohio is known as the mother of presidents. How many U.S. presidents were born in the state?
Were there 46 presidents?
Yeah, even though Trump is 45 and 47. There's 40.
No, so then there's 45 because Coolidge was 2 of them as well.
So how many of the 45 were born in Ohio? It's the mother of presidents. Mother.
4.
7.
Wow.
And then the final one, I have a picture. What is unique about the Ohio state flag?
Looks kind of like a butthole.
There is kind of a butthole on here. It's the only state that is a burgie, which is like kind of a slope slanted.
Oh, all right, cool. Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it. It's just like it's not a rectangle. It's like a slanted with like a triangle cut on the side.
Yeah.
It wasn't really a doable quiz, but I just thought there were 7 interesting facts, or a couple interesting facts maybe. Tomato juice though. Blech.
What can we, of these facts, what can we take from that and apply them to the Markley book? How can we? More
rural than city, even though there are a couple big cities.
Yeah.
When in this book, Tina goes to space, it's like, birthplace of astronauts.
Where's Ohio State?
I believe it's in Columbus.
It's in Columbus? Okay.
I think so. Which is probably why there's so many people there.
Yeah. Because
that's 50,000 people there alone.
Right.
So.
Do those count as residents?
I think so.
Because I wasn't.
Or because they're not permanent.
When I was living in the dorms in college, I was not a resident of that county.
So you're just a resident of where you came from?
I mean, on my ID, it said,
Sure.
It was still my parents' house.
I don't know. Don't know. The other thing I have before I talk about the book itself, and this I think we might have talked about with him.
Did you vote today?
I did not.
Skip it.
We were voting on presidential election 2024. I think we talked about this with him when we spoke to him, but it was 4 years ago. Option to be adapted for HBO by Euphoria showrunner Sam Levinson, and I don't think anything's happened.
That's an interesting match. I mean, it's easy. It's like fits into a very, very easy, like 4-episode miniseries structure.
One
right, like one per character, and then you have them interacting, and then that's it. It's like and each one can be an hour long or more than an hour long.
Well, I was also thinking about like when I remember that, because I did the research and I started reading whatever, and then when I remembered that, I was like, oh, like you could sort of see like 56 as like a Jacob Elordi type. He has to be bigger, but like someone big and imposing. Like I can see sort of maybe where Sam Levinson liked this kind of material and then took high school stereotypes maybe from this and applied them to like the hot girl. And,
but that stuff exists anyway. That's already in the world. I was thinking that like, one reason why I wouldn't want to see this made into a movie or a TV show is that generally I hate age jump things where you have characters where it's like, now this guy is going to have the thinning hair.
Yeah.
Like I generally think that looks really stupid, and it
like you would need it because there's a 10-year gap basically.
Yeah. Right? It worked in True Detective. But like, there's very few things where I'm just like, oh yeah, like that looks good. That person looks natural. And I was thinking like, oh, it should be rotoscoped or it should be animated.
Or like both of them, or just like one of them?
What do you mean?
Like, so if it's telling a story of like when they were like 18 and 27 or whatever,
the whole thing. Should be, yeah.
Because you could cast like 25-year-olds to play 27 or whatever, and then rotoscope them in high school.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If it's rotoscoped, you do it like that. Otherwise, if it's animated, you can just hire voice actors and have like Lorenzo Music play. Mm-hmm. I think Lorenzo Music might be dead.
Theme song. What do you think? What do you think of Ohio?
I liked it. I liked it a lot.
You had not read it before.
I had not read it before. I liked it a lot. I think Stephen Markley is, along with like someone like Jonathan Franzen, like one of the better social realist authors of our time. And
meaning what?
Meaning that his work exists inside the framework of like, the real events of the world are very much
it's not DC where it's like, this is Metropolis. It's like, no, this is New York and 9/11 happened.
Well, also, and it's like the problems are very grounded in the reality of the contemporary American landscape. And he's writing specifically about the world that we live in at this moment. Or I mean, when I say at this moment, I'm talking like over like a generation or whatever.
Like a way to say it is like it's almost written as nonfiction, but it is fiction.
Yeah, like a docudrama kind of almost. And I like that. And I think he's like a great mainstream writer. And that's not a dig. It sounds like a dig when you say mainstream, but that's stupid. I think he's like, of all the writers that could end up on the bestsellers list, like I think he's probably my favorite one.
Right.
And this makes a lot of sense because you think of, like when I think like one of the things that was a major benefit to Ohio was the fact that Stephen King tweeted about it.
Yeah.
Stephen King was like, this book rocks. And I think this book sales, like Stephen King does this. He's one of the people that can
tip the needle.
Yeah, he really can. Because if he just like mentions your book on Twitter, I think, and it's like, you know, that's not, Steve Markley earned every single book sale that he got. It's like Stephen King doesn't get any credit for that. Stephen Markley's a very good writer. If you're a lousy writer, Stephen King saying your book is great, it's not going to make your book great. But like I think there's a reason like Stephen King likes Stephen Markley because even though Stephen King's not writing social realist stuff, he is writing like very traditionally structured stuff.
Well, we talked about this a little bit via text about how there's something, what was the word you, and I don't want to, maybe you don't want to say this on the episode, but like that he's like a little too adherent to rigid traditional structure.
I'm fine with saying that.
So much
again,
so that
I don't think that's not a diss.
I don't know if I want to put like words in your mouth or like air dirty laundry, but I think what I compared it to is that like a show like The Pit, which is great, is not surprising anyone.
Right.
But every once in a while, that can be like the best thing that you've seen in a long time. But not everything can be The Pit because then everything is just like, well, there's no like creativity, there's no whatever. I would say, and I based on almost every conversation we've had about every book in this show, I would guess that you would like, and I would like this book more if the coda did not exist.
Yeah, and it wraps things up, and it has to use such like superficial and extreme violence. I mean, when I say superficial, that violence does exist in the world, but like when we attach it to our fiction that we've developed in such a realistic manner, it makes it feel so much more like TV, or makes it feel so much more like fiction.
You're talking about like the terrorist attack?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the absolutely brutal murder at the end.
Yeah.
And I felt when I was this is again.
Wait, at the end, or you mean like the Tina stuff?
Tina killing Beaufort.
56. Yeah. But that's not in the coda, but yes.
Yeah. That stuff I had like, you know, it's like, okay, it gets me a little bit away from what I like about this stuff specifically, because it elevates the darkness of these people's worlds into a place of drama and melodrama rather than it being
misery porn?
Yeah. No. I mean, it still is kind of that, but rather than it being representative of like the nihilistic nothingness that this stuff usually leads to, it's a thing that leads to a large dramatic conclusion, because there's this belief that these things have to have large dramatic conclusions because fiction, that's the way fiction works.
Right.
We move toward the big thing where it's like, and then Tina sets him on fire.
Well, I thought. So the coda saying that like Lisa's not actually, like Lisa's probably been murdered or whatever. Like I don't need all that, or like knowing that the package being smuggled in the early part of the book is actually like a bomb and not drugs or whatever. Because like I don't need to know what that is. Like I know that Meg wrote in a thing, like part of her email is about like sort of maybe connecting that to the deluge, and I don't know if she talked about. I sort of read the beginning, so we'll get to that when we get to that. But I do think there's something really effective in hearing basically gossip for 360 pages about Tina,
right?
And then when you get to that final section and it's a Tina section, like I exhaled. I was just like, here we go. Like, it's just like, you know, it's going to be brutal.
Yeah.
And I think that works, but I think it's enough to know what happened to her, the real story of what happened to her.
That's the
as
thing.
Opposed to needing her to get vengeance, like movie style vengeance on her.
That's
assaulter.
the thing is that I think also though, once you set up the brutality of what actually happened to her and how like awful it is, how like, you know, not only the videotaping her and the drugging her, but then there's like another rape later that he's not like too graphic about, but it's graphic enough that like
also like implies that like it happens a lot, like it keeps happening.
But I think like as a reader, then like, or most readers like need that catharsis. Like they need Beaufort to suffer. 56. They need him to suffer, and they need Tina to like get her revenge. But then also there's like a moralism to the book that also says like, well, Tina also can't get away with it. Tina has to, like, you can't just do that, because the world, then it would be implying a world where
if she goes home to her fiance and
gets away with it, then it's like, what is that? That's justice. Is that justice? It's probably not. It's like, I don't know. I don't know if retributive violence equals feminism. It does not. But like, there is this sense of like, I don't want to say catharsis, but when she kills him, you feel like he's getting what's coming to him, right? Mm-hmm. Because even up until the last moment, it's like, this guy's he's a danger to all the people around him for various reasons. Even though there have been some stabs at making us feel sympathetic to him.
Well, I think there's a thing that like this book does that Markley does really well, where everyone is like a victim of their circumstance, good or bad. Like, it just, everything almost feels inevitable, which is like so sad that everyone from this town, good and bad, being largely in a poor area kind of is like, well, of course you're going to go to war and you might die in war, or you're going to like suffer PTSD and come back and like kill yourself, or like be a drug, like you're in the heart of the smack dab of the opioid epidemic, or what, like all that stuff. It just feels like, good or bad, you are stuck being where you are here, whatever.
Well, and one thing that I really like about it is that none of the characters are morally in the clear. Like, you could be, like, obviously because of my personal politics and various things in my life, like I as I was reading, I was like, oh, I relate to the Bill Ashcraft guy, right? Like the guy that's like main character in the first section, right? And as he's going through, I'm like, oh yeah, like I see this. This is the guy who I would be if I were in this book.
Because he sees the world for what it is, man.
And, well, I think that's painted as being a little bit naive in the book. But like, that's definitely how I thought of myself, or have thought of myself in the past, like that. But then you get to the stuff with Tina where he's like, oh man, we don't need to involve ourselves in that. Come on. Like, he's so morally righteous about Iraq and about politics, but when it comes to
things he could actually impact,
the thing between him and someone like just down the street, when he could save this girl who like sneered at him once and made him like feel belittled. Like, he's just like, we don't need to involve ourselves with that. Whereas the other guy, the guy who I'm like totally politically like, I'm like, yeah, like fuck that guy. Why would I, what's his name? Rick, yeah.
Franklin?
Yeah, like him, I'm like, just like, yeah, he seems like an asshole. He seems like the type of kid that in high school I would be like, fuck him.
Right.
I like, that guy would beat me up or whatever. But then he has the morally just point of view, and he's like, no, we need to stop something. We need to do something to save this girl, because what's happening to her is awful. And then he does something that's like very like potentially risky to help her, which in its own way backfires. Because again, no action is without negative consequence in this world. But like, because I was not relating to that guy, then him doing the morally right thing while the person that I was relating to does the morally wrong thing, it creates a very complicated lattice of emotions for the reader. Because whoever you are in that circumstance, actually, the people who were already relating to Rick Brinklin were probably just like, yeah, I know that he's going to, which is how I know what Stephen Markley's politics are. Because Stephen Markley's trying to complicate it.
Right.
He's trying to take the guy that's wrong and make him do a right thing. Like, if you are like a guy that loves the Iraq war and thought it was great, then like that scene comes up and you're like, I knew it. That guy was right the whole time. Like, so then it becomes not complicated for that person reading the book. So I think that gives away a little bit.
Also, like, the book literally starts with like a hero's parade for that guy, right? So you're like, he is viewed publicly, even if you're not.
Right. And Bill Ashcraft, like, a little bit gives the speech from The Americanization of Emily. Have you seen that movie? Do you know it?
I do not know
like,
that.
That's a movie written by Patty Chayefsky, starring Julie Andrews and James Garner, where James Garner gives us, he's like a guy that works in the embassies in England during World War II. And he goes to this lady's house. Julie Andrews is like his romantic interest in the film. And he goes to her house to meet her mother. And her mother is like talking about her son, who's a war hero. And he sort of like starts yelling at her a little bit. Mm-hmm. He's like, I don't think your son's a hero. And here's why I don't think your son's a hero. Because like, we keep having these parades for people who die. And we keep building statues for people who die. And those statues make people think that war is heroic. And I've seen war. I've been to war. It's not heroic. It sucks. If anything, it's hell. And so we shouldn't be rewarding people for going into hell. We should, so like every time that like someone builds well, he's talking about his brother specifically, because his brother went to war and his brother was killed in war. And then they had a parade in his hometown and a statue. And then he goes, and you know what happened? Now my little brother wants to join the army because he looks up to his big brother who died and who they built a statue of. And so like, that's a very complicated idea that like, if you're not a veteran or if you're not someone who has fought in a war, like you are almost not allowed to make that argument, right? Like people can very much just be like, you don't know. So, but like that said, I'm not a veteran. I have not even sniffed a war, but like my instincts are that that's the correct argument. That like while heroics certainly happen in war, saying that soldiers are heroes is very proximal to saying that war is good. And like that feels crazy to me. That's like a very crazy argument for anyone to make. So I don't know. I appreciate that argument seems to me to be the argument being made in the book, but at the same time, I'm obviously approaching this book with my own political biases. Right. So Stephen Markley might be thinking something completely different from that.
Well, I think there's also something that like he does that's very simple, but relates to that, where it's just like they're also just friends. Like Rick and Bill are just friends because like they've always been friends. Like, you know, they like have diametrically opposed beliefs and will fight each other or whatever. But also at the end of the day, like they are friends who do things together and like are friends until the literal end.
Well, I'll also say that I think that this is noting a time when that was possible. And I don't know if that's possible.
I was going to say, like, when I had that idea before the last thing you said, it felt like a simpler time, even though it was like 20 years ago, where now it just feels crazy. But also maybe in 20 years, we look back at this time, we'd be like, oh man, we could have been friends or we were friends or whatever. And then like, whatever.
Yeah.
This book is about, we didn't really talk about it, what it's about. It's about like 5, I think.
Let's name them.
5 alumni of a high school all come back to their hometown on the same night for different reasons.
Is it 5? Bill, Stacy, Tina.
Well, the coda is Lisa, who doesn't actually, because she's not.
Yeah. And what's his name? Dan Eaton. And it's structured in 4 large chunks, like of that night. So you have like essentially what's a square within a little coda on the side. And each of these chunks is over like a 12-hour period or whatever. And they overlap a little, but you don't necessarily see what's going on in the other stories. There's like a little bit of seeing each individual person, but then you don't. But then you get it through flashbacks and stuff like that.
Right.
They're high school stories, which is something that I was annoyed by, which I'm going to go ahead and recognize is totally stupid thing to be annoyed by.
Cool.
But like I thought, like, to me, it's like if the concept is all happening in one night, then doing flashbacks is like a structural abomination. It should, I don't know, we should stay in the present and then learn those things through dialogue and stuff. But that's dumb. And it's a better book for him not having done that.
Yeah,
because the high school stuff is really rich, and also you get like altered perspectives on different things that went on.
Because I also do think that it would feel so like forced if you learned everything from the flashbacks in dialogue. It's like,
because it's a bit like someone entering a room and going like, Joey, as you know, today's my wedding day, and it's like, why would I say that to you?
Or people just like, brother, remember when that time? It's just like, no, we don't, whatever.
I've noticed that in fiction, brothers and sisters very often call each other bro and sis. And I'm just like, I feel like that doesn't ever happen in real life.
It feels possible or plausible. Not that this needs to be like specifically realistic or whatever, but that 4 people who all were like good friends or part of the same circle of friends or whatever, or like interacted heavily with one another in high school, could all come back to the same town on the same night. But then for all that to happen and then for all of them to like talk to one another the whole time, it's just like that's not good.
Yeah. And it's also like in some ways arguably like the most dramatic or second most dramatic night of their entire lives for each of them independently on their own thing.
Right.
You know what I was thinking about on the way here? I was listening to and this goes back to Markley being what I think of as a writer that is sort of adherent to structure in a way that I think holds him back a little bit, is I was listening to the John Mulaney interview on WTF, and they were talking about John Mulaney's show, Everybody's Live.
Yep.
John Mulaney, which as far as I know, I'm the only person in the world who watches. But Marin like asked him about it, and he's essentially probing about it, saying like, it's not very good, your show. And Mulaney says something that's really, really interesting, which is, yeah, I'm not actually that interested in it being good, because what happens is we're always looking for something that works. And then when we find something that works, a joke or a setup or a punchline, like we don't want to do that thing again. We don't want to do what works. We want to always be looking for the next thing that works.
Yeah.
And so like that, when you watch that show, you get the sense that of its chaos and that everything is anything can happen. Whereas like if you watch like Jay Leno is like the opposite of that. Right. Jay Leno is like, he's like a guy punching the clock, and he comes in and he delivers impeccably crafted jokes and really knows how to interview people in a way where there's like no meandering in the conversations. Right. Whereas like Mulaney doesn't know how to do any of that stuff. His conversations with his guests are like, he talks specifically in this interview about how there's no like pre-taped like conversation about what they're going to talk about on air. Oh. And you can really tell when you watch the show, because there's like the example that he gives is he's talking to Tina Fey and he goes, do you collect anything? He just goes, no. He goes, yeah, me neither. And then there's like a 3-second pause where they're clearly trying to figure out what the next thing that they're going to talk about is. And like that's an interesting way to do things. And I'm not saying, I feel like it feels like an insult to compare Stephen Markley to Jay Leno, even though Jay Leno was like the most successful comedian ever to live, probably.
He's never touched his Tonight Show money.
Yeah. And he's always like getting his face burned or his kneecap smashed now.
He's that generation's Jeremy Renner.
That's right. Yeah. But like there is something about being like,
we talked about on here that Hilly fell down, right? Was Heather here for that? Was that the episode?
I don't remember.
I do think we talked about that day where he went to that, like people went to that hotel and found out that Hilly fell down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It was like, how did he? Okay.
Yeah.
But there is something to be said about like Markley being really, really good at delivering a product that is like in the mold of, the epic novel, the 500-page novel that hits all the beats and then like soars into a satisfying conclusion and then has a little coda at the end that tags everything and goes like, in case you missed the fact that she called that in the email she called her friend Magical instead of Miracle, the name that she had been calling her throughout all of high school, because it's not really that girl sending the emails. Like, in case you missed that, we're going to remind you about it later on so that we know you're not going to miss anything within this novel. Yeah, it's the pit, which is great. You need the pit.
You need the pit.
You want the pit.
I love that Dan twice with two different characters across two very different parts of his life bonds with people over Calvin and Hobbes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Beautiful. I also never really thought about it being in Ohio. Like, it's not, but it basically is. Like, apparently seasonally, like what Calvin goes through is like anywhere USA, but also like with snow and everything is pretty Ohio. And Bill Watterson from Ohio.
I always thought of Calvin and Hobbes as being a New England thing. I don't know why.
I think not at all tying to Calvin and Hobbes, like sort of the beginning. I think that there's something also coming off the last book, which we don't have to mention or drag through the mud again. But just like starting this book, you're like, oh, right. Like reading good books can be good, right? Like as opposed to.
Yes.
But I think there's something that like
is fully felt characters that have real emotions and come to those emotions naturally through things that we've been shown in the text. And we understand the characters well enough to know what their reactions to those events are going to be, because Stephen Markley knows how to create a character that feels realistic and three-dimensional. And he's not just using them as a mouthpiece for like, whatever Doug Cooper was using.
But I also think like early on, like there's something that is like, again, I think we were talking at the beginning of this episode about how, or maybe it was before I started recording, about how this is Ohio, but it sort of could be anywhere. Like it kind of feels like New Jersey or whatever. But there's that sense of like going back to where you grew up and like seeing some businesses that are still there, some that are new things, some things that are just like empty.
Yeah.
And like how relatable that is and like what that means. And also specifically in this time going from like 2003 to 2012 or whatever, like, and what we all know, having lived through that, what that was like and what that means, is like it's like I don't want to call it a shortcut, like it's a shortcut to empathy and understanding and like just world building.
I think I talked with you about this a little bit, but there's a moment in there that like a lot of times when you're watching period piece movies or things that are specific to a like exact time or something, they will drop knowledge about a specific historical figure in the corniest way possible. Like, oh, there's no way that George Bush is going to win Florida. Or they'll say like in Titanic, notoriously, it's like that Picasso's going nowhere.
Yes.
Or whatever. But there's one throwaway line in this text that is just about Maurice Claret, which is, if you don't know who Maurice Claret is, you can just zoom right past that line. But if you do know who Maurice Claret is an amalgam of all the stuff that's happening in this book, because he was a guy who was an amazing freshman at Ohio State University.
Running back.
Heisman Trophy candidate. Didn't win, I don't think. Heisman Trophy candidate as a freshman. Declared for the draft. After he declared for the draft, they changed the rules so that you had to be older. And then he couldn't go back to college because he had secured a
sponsorship.
A sponsor. He got an agent, which makes him a professional. So he couldn't go back to college. And so he couldn't go to college, couldn't go in the NFL. So he had like a year in between where he just like got out of shape, showed up to the combine the next year, I think drunk, was drafted by the Broncos, but like never made it onto the actual team, was involved in a high-speed chase with police, was involved in a couple robberies. And so like he is this like obviously
failed potential.
Yeah. And he's like, I think he's like a sober guy that is on like the sort of like motivational lecture tour, speaking tour. And I think he would probably, as a guy that is sober and I think has been through programs, would be like, this is the path that I needed to get to where I am today. There's no other way that I would have gone to where I am. If I had been in the NFL, I probably would have died from drugs or something like that. And so he, you know, if he is buying into the AA stuff, which I think is good. I think AA is a wonderful thing for the world. Then I think he probably accepts all the responsibility for
sure.
But as an outsider looking at that, there's no way to not look at that and think like they fucked this guy. Like he had like so much potential and could have been Adrian Peterson.
Right.
And he just like circumstances just like stepped in his way and ruined his life.
Well, I think like in this situation, like it is, because I think he's mentioned in like, oh, well, 56 is going to go to Ohio State and play with Maurice Claret next year or whatever, right? Like I think is it within context of that? Or
I think so, yeah.
But it feels like 56 not being able to go there is such a more common, where it's like this guy who is like even Tina after the fact, like when she comes back in the modern day, 9 years later or whatever, and like putting him in the car, like, and having like lived life and met other people, like realizing how big he is. But like there's people who just like were men in high school and like gifted for whatever, and then just did not have the book smarts to even, with the grace probably of every teacher at that high school and the principal being like, you need to pass this kid because like we need like whatever.
Did I ever tell you about, I have two brief stories here. Did I ever tell you about that guy that worked with Kristen that was like significantly smaller than me? He was probably like 5'7", 5'8", probably 160 pounds.
Yes, you have. But tell the story anyway.
And he just like told everyone at that retail job that he had been given a full ride scholarship to Ohio State to play tight end. And it's like, that job, it was mostly like women who didn't care about football and things like that. So he was like, it's not like they were impressed by it because they were just like, okay, like you're going to play tight end, or you almost went to play tight end at Ohio State. So I think he was just doing it for his own ego, right, to make people think like, oh, probably he always wanted to do that, but he couldn't. But then like Kristen told me that, and I was just like, yeah, like that's no. I pulled up my, because he's like my age, this guy. So I pulled up my phone and I was like, no, look at this picture of Kellen Winslow. Look at this picture of Jeremy Shockey. Look at all these people that are like, these are people that go on full ride scholarships for tight end to these big universities,
to Miami, whatever.
And they, when they're 19 years old, look like superheroes.
Yeah.
They look like professional wrestlers. They're not like 5'7", 160 pounds. That does not exist.
Correct.
And so like, I don't know, that's funny to think about.
It's very funny.
And so like thinking about Beaufort, that like being a linebacker that's going to go to one of these places, like you get this, if you like know about college football or whatever, which I don't really know that much about college football, but like I know enough to, like, I know that he is, you can picture him in your head. He's like fucking Brock Lesnar or whatever.
Yeah.
Because this is the second thing, the most athletic person that I ever knew in my life, went to Marshall and played with like Byron Leftwich and those guys during those years. And he never, I don't even know if he started.
Well, like the thing is, like every high school, like if your high school has like one kid who's great, like they go to college, and then like the college has like one kid who's great who then goes on the end. Like it's just like the winnowing down of talent from, oh, you're like, or like the hottest in your high school, or the smartest in your high school, or the best in your high school, or whatever, most athletic. It becomes, oh, well, everyone is that on this team now, and now you have to like rise above, and like the people who are going to rise above, and maybe he had what it took to make to the NFL, but couldn't get there, and then his life fell apart, and then he was murdered.
I think that's a much more common story, is not necessarily that people get murdered, but
failed potential.
Yeah, people go to college and they they play college football, and then they get addicted to pills, and they get CTE, and their brains don't work right, and it's like, it's interesting that societally we're willing to accept that so that we can be entertained by sports, because the fallout, I mean, we hear about Junior Seau.
People threaten to stop watching football. People threaten to leave Twitter or whatever. Just like at the end of the day, it's just easier not to. Like you can just, the compromises you are able or willing to make with yourself, but like, well, like I don't want to be, like I'm not really on Twitter anymore, but like, for Too Fast, when we did the podcast, like that's where the people who listen to our show are. Yeah. It's like, well, I'm not gonna go to Blue Sky. I don't want to go to Blue Sky. Like I want to not do it at all. But like the people who care about this thing exist in this place. It's like, well, I don't know.
Which also like a little, this is not exactly correlated to that, but it's like sort of the exact same thing with the Iraq War. We mobilized so heavily against the Vietnam War largely because there was a draft. When we took the draft away, I mean, people protested the Iraq War, but people protested the Iraq War heavily in the first couple of years, and then I think it died off pretty significantly, even though that war went on for 20 years. Right. One reason why was because it was very, very easy for politicians and the media to make that war seem like it wasn't affecting us on a day. It wasn't affecting our lives, right? It affected individuals and people in towns, mostly from poor towns, Rust Belt towns, towns that have families that have zero influence socially in the greater world. Because that's who joins the military for the most part. You're not getting the private school kids with the Waltons' children or the Sacklers' children are not joining the army and going to Iraq. And if they are, they're not actually engaging in war, right? That's being left to the working class kids, and so they're being sacrificed. Yeah, they're being sacrificed for something that is
for ideology.
Yeah, pretty bad feeling. This book did make me mad about the Iraq War all over again. I was reading, I was just like, motherfuckers, this fucking Donald Rumsfeld ass motherfucker.
There was a point long ago, probably years ago now at this point, when you had pitched a possible module for the podcast on the machinery of America. I feel like this would have fit directly into that, along with books by 6 other white men.
Okay. All right, I'll take my lumps.
Well, no, it wasn't. We never did it because I think you couldn't diversify it. Also, that would be a fucking downer of a module, which we don't shy away from. But Pynchon, DeLillo, Elroy, Mailer, Roth, Thompson.
There's definitely room in there for your James Baldwins and your Toni Morrisons and your Cynthia Oziks and
because I wrote down the machinery of America in my notes in terms of like how it just chews you up and spits you out or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, wait, we have a module built around this specifically. Or, outlined, skeletoned, frameworked, whatever.
Yeah.
So.
Which of these sections did you like the best of the 4? Because it's a risky process structuring a book like this, because if you're really into the Bill Ashcraft section, then you move on, and the Stacy section is not as compelling, then you're just like, why did we leave that one guy for so long?
I don't know. Like, I think the Bill is a really good one to start with.
Yeah.
I don't know if this comparison's going to land at all, but I feel like, and I don't know why I thought of it, but like comparing it to like a Mario Kart or like a fighting game where it's like the Bill is like sort of the all around, like he might not be anybody's favorite, but like he's a solid one to start with. And then like you have like others who have higher highs or lower lows, or like there are other abilities that are like a little bit better, a little bit more interesting, a little bit sexier, a little bit more scarier, a little bit more whatever.
Bill also is that section is structured in a very like crime novel kind of way.
Yep.
Like it's a self-destructive man
with nothing to lose, who is on a mission, and that mission is he's delivering a secret package. Like that's all like, that's real like crime novel stuff. So I think that's compelling in a very like genrefied kind of way. Stacy's is kind of like a forbidden mystery love story,
and
sort of.
And that's like such a self-conscious movement away from the Bill narrative that it like balances out genre-wise, and you're like, oh, I'm reading two completely separate books here. In a way that's satisfying. I think it's a trick that he pulls off, but I think it's like an incredibly risky trick to take.
And how would you describe Dan if you had to put like that into a genre? Because like Teen is like the revenge thriller sort of, but also not, because it's sad. Like revenge thrillers, I feel like typically have a happy ending, and that's by design. It's not.
Yeah.
How would you describe like what genre?
Well, Dan is it's kind of a love story, right?
A little bit. It's a sad love story. A little bit.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's the least genre. It would be hardest to pin that in a genre.
Yeah.
I like the part where he puts the cigarette out on his eyeball, though.
I wonder if that's something that Markley had seen or heard of or just made up.
I wonder if he has, because he writes really knowledgeably about a lot of stuff. And I'm sure that he had a lot of discussions with Iraq War vets, whether they be his own personal friends or people that he sought out to talk with about this book.
Probably.
Yeah, I'd imagine.
I was also glad, I'm just looking through my highlights now on Goodreads. I'm glad that he mentioned, I think it is in the Stacy section, where they refer to her as the assonantly awkward name Kaylin Lynn.
Kaylin Lynn, yeah.
Where like earlier, you're like, Kaylin Lynn?
Yeah.
Really? And then like later when describing her, she's like yes, her name is weird. I was like, cool, good.
It's like when people's names are like end with an R and then their last name starts with an R, and you're just like, why did you do that? Now it's hard to say those names together.
Rural Juror.
Yeah, Rural Juror.
This is another book that references Zadie Smith's white teeth. So I feel like
that was it. I don't remember that.
Even though Stacy wrinkled her nose, when it's like Lisa's giving her books.
Yeah.
Even though Stacy wrinkled her nose at the weight and length of Zadie Smith's white teeth, she finished in 3 nights, and Lisa rolled her eyes like no shit. Because like so much of Open Water was about, not so much of it, but like Zadie factored heavily into that.
Did you ever see the Richard Linklater movie Suburbia?
No.
This book is very similar.
I believe it.
To the movie Suburbia, which is an Eric Bogosian play that takes place in New Jersey, but the Richard Linklater movie has been moved to Texas. But that movie is essentially takes place all in one night, takes place mostly outside the front of a convenience store, but it's on the night that these kids all went to high school together. It's like 10 years after their high school graduation. So they're like a little too old to be doing what they're doing. One of the friends has returned from the Gulf War. And then another friend is like a rock star that is back in town and just played a show at the local arena and like is going to stop by to see them. And so it's like all structured around that. And so this book has most of those things. It has I mean, even the rock star, like Ben Harrington is not like a rock star, but he's like a guy that, he's got the he was a songwriter or whatever who died in the opium stuff. It's got the war veteran back. So it's got like a lot of, I don't know. And this book has kind of a Bogosian energy to it where like sometimes you can access its anger really easily.
Well, I also think that like, and not to discredit Suburbia or Markley, this is not what I'm saying at all, but like it feels like when you focus on a small town, like singer-songwriter of talent, like it's like they don't even have to be good. It's just like the guy who wrote songs and like maybe had a song on the radio one time. Or
there's
it's not even like a war hero. It's just like the guy who came back from war or the guy who died in war or whatever. Like they become legend locally, even though they just live the normal life. They're not, again, that's way underselling everything, but just like these archetypes are just true because in a town of a couple hundred people or whatever, the one guy who dies in the Iraq War is a big deal. Like everybody knows his name.
Yeah, there are bands from my high school that I'm still like, I wish that band were still around. I wish that like I could listen to them play one. There's one band that sounded like Creedence Clearwater Revival called the Airlings. They were pretty good.
All the bands I went to college with are multinationally successful
There's
artists.
two of them, right?
Yeah, Titus Andronicus and the Front Bottoms. It's crazy.
Yeah. No, that's cool.
Crazy to me how I walked out of Front Bottoms concerts that like so many people like later in life would have killed to be in that room. Like I don't
Yeah, it's like him just playing a guitar in a frat house.
Not even a frat house, like in a dorm room at Ramapo, just like in like a living room. And I'm just like, I don't like this. This isn't for me. Like how many people like I've like, oh no, I was friends with like Brian Sellers on my phone. Like not like we're not like not. I haven't talked to him since college. I'm just like what? I'm like, yeah, he's just a guy. Like I have no context for like your idol.
You should invite him
to
the next barbecue.
I was better friends with his wife, but yeah.
Invite his wife to the next barbecue.
Yeah, all right. All right, Danielle, if you're listening, we know you are. Join.
We don't. I didn't go to college with anybody famous, but one time.
Do you think if I invited him to my next barbecue, he would think that I was trying to like
for 100%
starfuck?
Yes, and you would be so.
But not for me, for you.
I don't care that much about that guy. I just think it'd be funny to.
Should invite his wife and she'd be like, yeah, I'll leave Brian at home.
You're better friends with that comedian that's more famous than him anyway.
Who?
Isn't there a comedian that you're friends with? That used to go to his shows?
Greg Barrett. Like I thought you meant to because I also went to college with Grace Helbig, who's like a big, really successful YouTube star. I never met her in college, but she was.
Who that is.
I don't know. Again, to your point about like, I wish that high school band was still together in a town. Like, I don't know how big they might have said, or Markley might have said in the book. I don't know, like how big New Canaan is. It's just like, it's not like, oh, they're the cool band in whatever the town was.
Like this guy wrote songs and he had a little bit of talent. And
it's like tonight's a good night to get drunk, Cooper. But like, it's like no, like he just like was a thing, and then like he had like a sad story, and like he's memorialized because he died. You know what I mean? Like it's that kind of thing, right? So, other thoughts about Ohio?
We talked about it as a movie, right, or as a TV series.
I think
it feels like it would get made. Of all the stuff that we've read, this feels like one that like seems like it would get made.
Because it doesn't seem expensive.
And I want it to get made because I want Markley to get that money.
Yeah. It is funny to me that we did like that adaptable, unadaptable module. And a lot of the unadaptable stuff, like actually, is pretty straightforward. And the adaptable stuff like has basically not come out.
Yeah.
Although early reports on Project Hail Mary, glowing.
Yeah. And the actor came out.
No longer called Memory.
Right.
But Japanese Breakfast, Michelle Zauner stopped writing the book. You know, you win some, you lose some. We have an email address, lottery@cageclub.me. We have Meg's reaction to Ohio. But first, we got a pitch. Are you ready to say no to this person pitching their author?
Shit, yeah.
Pitch. The
Let's
subject
do
line,
this.
pitch, : the world is angry in this shocking thriller. Hi, Shreds and Joey. You can top billing.
Hell yeah.
I loved your latest episode on George Perek's A Man Asleep. George Perec, by the way, was an answer. No, he wasn't an answer. No, Perec was an answer in the New York Times cross proposal this week.
That's awesome.
And I was just like, I would not have known.
That's a weird one for them to pick. It feels like it's probably random that they picked that one. But
your discussion about lucid dreaming and Perek's depiction of solitaire as a quiet yet profound act was such an intriguing take.
Oh, you know what? Maybe it wasn't random. Maybe they did listen. Holy shit.
They also just might grab a thing, run it through like an AI, synthesize like get the transcription.
You're so cynical.
And Shred's prediction that Elif Batuman's next book title, honestly, I couldn't stop laughing. Truly one of those moments that shows why your podcast is such a gem.
All right. Well, okay. I don't remember what I predicted, but it was the Conscript of Pure Reason or something like that.
I'm pretty sure I also included both of those in the description for the episode. Like she does not list what our guess was, but I just said Shreds predicts Elif Batuman's next title.
Okay.
But you know.
I couldn't stop laughing.
Listening to the way you dissect Perek's layered storytelling got me thinking about John Vines, whose debut novel, The World is Angry. I also want to say, and this maybe is all payola, we said no to a person who, like, we cannot escape the publicity of this guy's novel that is now being adapted by like an A24 or whatever, right?
Did we? I don't know. I don't know what this is.
You know exactly what I'm talking about. It was.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
What was it called?
Book looked so shitty though. It looked like it was it was called like Sickos or something like that.
And you're like, I think I know this from
just seeing it at Barnes and Noble.
Yeah.
Or whatever.
I don't remember. But yeah, like we've seen like three things like,
what is the name of that book? That's gonna make me crazy. But it seemed like not my thing at all.
So put the name John Vines in your head.
John Vines.
The World is Angry. Feels like a perfect fit for your show.
The World is Angry is the name of the book?
Yeah.
I'm not going to say no to this right away. Let's
Feels like a perfect fit for your show. It's a psychological thriller that follows Adam and his friends as they grapple with the chilling question: are they chasing a killer or walking straight into his trap?
Oh,
the book has received.
Well,
at the start of the sentence, you say, "I'm not saying no," and then I don't know, 12 words later, you just say, "Oh."
It's like that's so log-liney, you know? Like that's very like I like those kinds of books. I like like I love Red Dragon and shit like that. But like, it's so log-liney.
So Eve, who wrote this, who's the CEO of Eve Bailey Media, says the book has received rave reviews, being called, quote, unsettlingly beautiful and showcasing one of the most, quote, original voices in years. With its eerie precision and unsettling themes, I think the story's twists and turns would spark some fantastic conversations with you two, especially given how deeply you explore the abstract and visceral aspects of literature.
Okay.
John's background is just as compelling as his writing. Raised in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, he's been shaped by curiosity and travel, drawing insights from the diverse perspectives he's encountered throughout his life. As a father of 3 boys, he brings an optimistic and grounded perspective to his work, crafting stories that are as much about human connection as they are about tension and mystery. I can't help but think your audience would connect with his thoughtful approach to storytelling and the way he weaves personal growth into the fabric of his characters' journeys. I hope you consider having John on the podcast. He'll bring a unique voice to your book club discussions and offer your listeners a fresh perspective on crafting narrative tension and exploring human complexities.
Well, it is a book that takes place in Houston.
So he's from North Carolina, he's writing about Houston. Interesting.
And, well, there's also some New Orleans stuff in here. So maybe we'll add it to Texas. Not promising anything. Thank you for reaching out. I'll look into it.
She's definitely listening. Eve Bailey.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We'll look into it.
I'm trying to find New Millennium Boys.
That's the one. New Millennium Boys. Yeah. I think Boys is with a Z.
You goddamn better believe it is.
Yeah. It's like, I'm not interested in that. The same way that I'm not interested in that Sean Thor Conroe book, Fuck Boy. It's just like, I just don't feel like that's in my wheelhouse of things that I'm interested in. Nothing against those people. They're probably nailing their aesthetic goals. Those goals are just outside of my interests, I think.
They're not your goals.
Yeah.
Meg's reaction to Ohio. Lottery@cageclub.me if you want to write in about this book or any book. Lottery@cageclub.me. I really liked this novel. Did you talk about this with her at all or no?
A little bit, yeah.
In some ways, it felt like a prequel to The Deluge. This is what I was saying. This is all I read. The, quote, mysterious organization that Bill is working for could easily be the Weathermen.
Oh, that's right. Bill at the end has gone into politics and is a...
But also just maybe
not politics.
It might be the CIA or something.
He's gone into no, but he's gone into radical leftist politics, which it might be the CIA because, yes, for those reasons.
In any case, it's clear that the deluge, quote unquote deluge. So many of my notes are just like him using that word and just highlighting.
It's cool.
As a concept, was something that Markley was thinking about when writing this book because the phrase as is meant in the novel is used. Mm-hmm. I think that I like this book better than The Deluge, but I also think that I might not have liked this book as much if I didn't already read The Deluge, which I said exactly.
I agree with that as well, yeah. That feels like very true.
Going back to my previous example, I'm not sure if Bill's mysterious underground political life would have, quote, worked for me if I hadn't already read The Deluge. Yeah. Similarly, I felt that Tina, who Stacy saw, was different than the Tina who we saw during her chapter. What I mean... The Tina from Stacy's section was someone into fire and brimstone religion. The Tina we saw didn't really seem that religious at all. I was also really sad that she didn't remember Stacy's name at first.
Well, she's also 10 years later, so I think...
And also had just murdered a guy.
I think a lot of teenagers who are very religious become, by the time they're 26, 27.
But also the way she's describing herself in high school is like she's cutting herself and she's like...
Yeah, her section was easily the toughest to read because it's like that stuff does happen. And it's worth dramatizing that stuff because it does happen. But at the same time, it's like...
Another trick that Markley does in this book that he did in The Deluge, that I really liked, is when he has 2 events from 2 different characters' perspectives, and there are different differences. In this novel, distinct differences. In this novel, Bill and Dan remember Bill getting pelted with paintball guns differently. Bill remembers holding together, and Dan remembers Bill crying.
Yeah, I probably remember all sorts of shit where I wasn't crying when I was a kid and I was like, oh, I'm very tough. And then people around me are just like, man, you cried so much.
I like the way the book was organized. I like that we had a scene of Lisa's mom and Stacy meeting before you have the scene of why that was so uncomfortable for Stacy.
Oh yeah, I agree too. That was a brutal scene when she pinches her nipple really hard. Ooh.
Yeah.
Oof. I wonder also how many conversations Stephen Markley had with like I guess lesbians who
maybe came out late in life.
Or whatever, you know, because it's like that's also something that it feels really, really well drawn and felt. And so, like, I don't know, it feels like something that a conversation will be had around so that you could mine those conversations for instead of it being all from the imagination. But if it is all from the imagination, hey, God bless you, Stephen Markley.
I kind of like that Lisa's murder ended up being, quote, the murder that never was, but the phrase itself felt a little too, quote, book for me. Yeah. Like the characters were self-aware of being in a book about it.
I'm getting cat itchy right now.
Well, we're almost done. What do you think? Who do you think is the most evil character in the book? My initial reaction was Kaylin, but I guess it's probably Todd. There are different kinds of evil, though, but I also wonder if I'm harsher on Kaylin because she's a woman. All in all, a great novel. I look forward to reading his next one.
It's Todd, but then with Kaylin as a second, because Kaylin is aware of her.
Well, she's the one who films it, right?
Yeah, and she's the one who
encourages it.
Yeah, and she's the one who gets him to kill Lisa.
Yes.
So all of those things.
Well, she's like the mastermind behind the muscle.
Yeah, but Todd is. Yeah, I don't know. They're both evil. I don't know by which degree. They both should probably go to prison.
Evil in different ways. Thoughts about the Ohio module?
Easily our best state module so far, I think. 3 top-notch books. 1 book that was weak, but easy enough that its weakness did not become like a real barrier, and it was still a fun book to talk about.
Yep.
Whereas like some books that are better than that book, like Sweet Days of Discipline or something like that, like that's a better book, but it's like not as fun to talk about.
Well, like what we learned on Too Fast is just like great movies and terrible movies are easy to talk about. Things that are just fine.
Yeah.
There's nothing to say.
But between Bluest Eye, Omen Setter's Luck, and Ohio, like those are pound for pound. That's the best 3 we've had in the module. New Orleans was good, but
yeah,
this is the best one. I think going to be rough.
Spoilers.
Oh shit. You can bleep it.
I got so much bleep technology to use in this episode. Just keep reading and keep bleeping.
Today's are you pointing? Why are you pointing to this?
So do today's crime. Then I'm cueing you into the thing at the end of the episode.
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah, what's today? Oh, you know what today's crime is? It's like affixing a string to a quarter so you can steal free games from an arcade. Theme song.